season. Midway through, they made the
Hit.
Yes, it happens in basketball and it happens in politics. A few months ago, passage of the biggest legislative change to retirement rules in over a decade seemed like almost a slam dunk. But then it missed, and now Congress is adjourned. So where exactly does that leave the Secure Act, as well as other bills aimed at helping Americans better prepare for retirement? It's that time again, time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
With us, David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
But David Scranton says, hey, not so fast.
How does it affect the markets? How does it affect the economy? Thanks to efficiencies in new technology and a staff of veteran analysts and portfolio managers, Sound Income Strategies strives to set new standards and bring institutional style investing to your portfolio. So when this thing called the Secure Act sailed through the House of Representatives back in May, and when I say sailed through, I mean by a vote of 417 to 3, it looked like it would be fast-tracked in the Senate. Instead, the bill stalled and it failed to get approval before this year's federal budget was finalized in July. Supporters, of course, were disappointed, but they remained optimistic that it would eventually be approved with most of its proposals intact. SECURE is also known as the Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act, and its main goal is to create easier opportunities for Americans to save for retirement. Now, we've mentioned the bill previously on the show, but today we're going to take a closer look at it, why it stalled in the Senate, and what concerns some financial strategists have over some of its proposed changes. We'll also talk about some of the other pieces of pending legislation to retirement rules and where they stand today. Joining me will be Laurence Katlikoff. He's an economics professor at Boston University. He's also co-author of the book, Get What's Yours, The Revised Secrets to Maxing Out Your Social Security Benefits. Along with David Stearns, founder and president of Stearns Retirement Group in Watkinsville, Georgia. First, let's break down the Secure Act and what Americans in or near retirement need to know about it. If it's passed, the Secure Act will represent the biggest legislative change to retirement rules since 2006. The bill is broad and very timely in terms of addressing some of the specific changes facing Americans at or nearing retirement age today. Now, as we've noted, it sailed through Congress with strong bipartisan support and was expected to do the same in the Senate, despite the stark partisan divisions on Capitol Hill. Overall, there is strong agreement on both sides of the aisle that the bill contains some valuable, thoughtful provisions. So here's a rundown. First, the Secure Act proposes raising the age at which you must start taking required minimum distributions, or RMDs, from the current age 70 and a half up to age 72. That means you'll be able to let your retirement funds grow tax-deferred for an additional year and a half. This addresses the simple fact that life expectancies are higher than ever before, and people need to plan and save for longer retirements. Next, given that Americans are living longer, many are also choosing to continue working longer. That's why the Secure Act also proposes allowing people with earned income to continue making contributions to traditional IRAs after age 70 and a half, which currently you can only do with Roth IRAs. Specifically, the current law allows a married couple, both over the age of 50, filing jointly with earned income of $15,000 to contribute up to $14,000 to a Roth IRA, even if only one of them is working, as long as the income threshold is not exceeded. Now, if the Secure Act ends up getting passed, it could also allow people to contribute to a traditional IRA, in addition to just a Roth IRA, and potentially deduct their contributions. Next, the bill outlines 3 provisions designed to help more small businesses offer retirement plans to their employees. Number 1, It increases the tax credit available from $500 a year all the way up to 50% of the business's startup costs. 2, it adds a tax credit for small businesses that set up new plans that include automatic enrollment. And 3, the Secure Act would make it easier for small businesses to join together in providing retirement plans and also give part-time workers access to those plans. The bill also seeks to expand the inclusion of annuities into 401k plans and to put a 10-year time limit on how long non-spouse beneficiaries can stretch out an inherited IRA, something that we'll be talking about a bit later on the show. The Secure Act also includes a more forward-looking provision which is aimed at urging people to start saving for retirement sooner rather than later. How are they doing this? Well, you see, there's a proposed exception for early withdrawal penalties for people using funds, that is retirement funds, to cover the cost of birth or the cost of adoption. The goal there is to encourage young people to save for retirement rather than deferring retirement savings in favor of starting a family, which is a choice that many couples feel they have to make. These proposals, as well as others within the Secure Act, are broadly seen as positive progress for the benefits industry. Although, naturally, different groups have various changes they would like to see made in the final version of the bill. Just recently, the American Retirement Association released research showing that the retirement savings gap on a state-by-state basis, and it stated that the Secure Act would help more than 28 million Americans who do not currently have access to a workplace retirement plan. And as discussed, a majority of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are also in favor of the bill. And its holdup in the Senate was mainly the result of policy objections unrelated to any of its specific changes to retirement laws. So the hope now is that the bill gets included in the budget that Congress needs to pass by October 1st, and that supporters remain optimistic. The director of retirement research at Carson Group, Jamie Hawkins, says, quote, "The Senate, generally speaking, wants it passed, and I think they'll get there. The bill is a very positive force. It's got to be just a matter of time before it breaks loose and gets over the finish line," close quote. Now, if that's true, there's one provision in the bill that has caused some concern, particularly as it relates to estate planning, and we'll talk about that more coming up in just a bit. Now it's time to welcome our first guest, Dr. Laurence Katlikoff. He's an economics professor at Boston University. He's also the author or co-author of more than a dozen books, including the bestseller, Get What's Yours, The Revised Secrets to Maxing Out Your Social Security Benefits. Dr. Katlikoff, thanks for joining us here again for another episode on the income generation.
It's my pleasure, Dave.
So we talked a lot on the show today about the Secure Act, but we also talked about the Social Security 2100 Act. And I know you're a little skeptical that that's going to solve the problem. Talk to us about that.
Well, Social Security is in much worse shape than most people think, including most members of Congress, because I don't think they've actually read the trustees' report that came out in June. If you look at Table 6F1, which is conveniently buried at the very back of the report, it shows the system is $43 trillion in the red. So that's the unfunded liability. That says if you look at all the benefits from now till the end of time that they project and subtract all the taxes and do this in present value the right way and subtract the trust fund, which is small, you're short $43 trillion. That's like 2 years of GDP. That's basically 2 years of government. I mean, that's twice the official debt. So the Social Security system has debt, red ink, that's more than twice as large as, or about twice as large as the total official debt that's we've been worried about. So raising, as this Social Security 2100 Act would do, which is raise the payroll taxation on rich people, would certainly help, but it's only going to make a dent. It probably would do about, because the Act also would raise benefits, so it's not like it's going to produce all that much net revenue.
So in your opinion then, in the 45 seconds we have left in this block, one of the things that they must do is have some sort of either cut in benefits or some sort of needs testing. In other words, it's not just offense, not just revenue, there's a defensive component also. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I would freeze the current system in place, pay off what we owe, and not let anybody accrue any extra benefits under the old system, and then force people to contribute 10% into a fully funded account, which is collectively invested in the global market, which is also progressive, where the government makes matching contributions. So there are ways to do this right. We're not doing them right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I don't know your party affiliation. It doesn't really matter. But we do have an election. We do have an election coming up in just 16 months, and based on what you're saying, I might consider voting for you. So right after the commercial break, I want to hear your thoughts about more of this. And you stay with us too. We have more here on the income generation. We'll be right back in a moment. If you're not using someone who's well trained in fixed income and you're born before 1966, it may just be time for you to break up with that advisor and move on. I would suggest someone who will care for you through these important years of your life. If you need help finding someone, call or write us. I'd also like to remind you of the special report entitled The Income Generation. This is available free to you, our loyal viewers, online. If you haven't downloaded your report, pick it up after the show. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation, again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. Financial experts have predicted that the next major recession could happen as early as this year. What would you do if it took half of your retirement savings with it? I'm David Scranton, founder of Sound Income Strategies. And there is a safer way, investing for income. By focusing primarily on non-stock market income-generating investments, you could significantly reduce the impacts of the next major recession. Visit the Retirement Income Store at soundincomestrategies.com to connect with an income specialist who can help you get started to an income-based retirement plan. So let's talk about one area of the Secure Act that has caused some concern, and that is the proposed change to the rules around so-called stretch IRAs. Essentially, this would be another rule change affecting required minimum distributions, or RMDs, one of the most crucial elements of successful retirement planning for most people. Now, as you might know, RMDs are basically mandatory withdrawals that the government forces you to take from 401ks, from IRAs, and similar plans, so that the IRS can finally collect the taxes that they've allowed you to defer while the accounts were growing. Currently, most retirement account holders must start making annual withdrawals at age 70 and a half. However, the Secure Act, as we mentioned, proposes changing that to age 72. There are a few exceptions to the rule, such as for people in their 70s still working. But in addition to account holders age 70 and a half and older, there's another large group that must take RMDs each and every year. And that is beneficiaries of those account holders. Just like retirees, non-spouse beneficiaries are required to take annual withdrawals from these inherited retirement accounts. There are different options for how to comply with this rule, and like most things having to do with the IRS, they can be complicated. One of those options is commonly known as something called the stretch IRA. Now, that's not an official term, really. It's more of a nickname based on the option's ability to stretch your required minimum distributions over a potentially long period of time, up to decades even. As it now exists, the stretch IRA is a valuable benefit for people who are financially savvy and good at planning ahead. It's also good for those who want to take full advantage of tax deferral, which can really add up over a long period of time. The concern now among some financial planners is that the Secure Act would essentially eliminate the stretch IRA option, rather than your non-spouse beneficiaries, who are typically children or grandchildren, being able to stretch the inherited IRA over decades. Their RMDs would have to be taken within a 10-year period. As a result, the ability to keep a tax-deferred account would be reduced to a much shorter period of time and be completely gone at the end of 10 years. And what's more, their RMDs would, of course, be much higher, since the account would need to be emptied by the 10th year. As you know, if you're already taking required minimum distributions, you know that these withdrawals are taxed at the highest income tax rates in the tax code, that is, ordinary tax rates. Even worse for your beneficiaries, if they're still working, their inherited distributions are added on top of their current income, possibly bumping them into a higher bracket and making the overall tax burden on these distributions more extreme. Now, could the provision eliminating stretch IRAs be removed from the Secure Act before it becomes law? Of course it can. In fact, despite all the optimism surrounding the bill, there's always a chance that it never gets passed at all. That's just the nature of politics. Nonetheless, it's always good to be aware of the possibilities and to plan ahead just in case. So, with that in mind, here are 2 tips. First, check your beneficiary forms. Remember that in order to take advantage of the stretch IRA, you must have an individual, that is a human being, named as the beneficiary of your IRA or Roth IRA. Second, review your trust. If the Secure Act should pass as is, then you may need to revise your IRA trust document in order to meet or nearly meet your original goals. So it's a good idea to start considering your options now. And most importantly, make sure you're reviewing all of this and discussing the Secure Act with the right financial advisor, one who can help you mitigate any negative impacts of these proposed changes, but also at the same time help you take full advantage of the opportunities. You should also be aware that the Secure Act isn't the only pending legislation that could have an impact on how Americans plan and save for retirement in the future. We'll talk about some of the others coming up in just a bit. And let's welcome back Dr. Laurence Katlikoff, economics professor at Boston University, and author or co-author of a dozen books, including Get What's Yours, The Revised Secrets to Maxing Out Your Social Security Benefits. So thanks for sticking around.
Sure.
So since I need to figure out now whether I want to vote for you for President of the United States in 2020, and we're talking about legislation, let's pivot for a second and let's talk about the Secure Act. How far do you think the Secure Act actually goes in terms of helping motivate people, enabling them to save for retirement to a greater extent?
Well, it seems to me that it's mostly for rich people because it allows people to wait until 72 rather than 70 and a half to start taking their minimum distributions from their retirement accounts, as far as I understand it. And on the other hand, it forces people that inherit retirement accounts to take their money out within 10 years rather than for the rest of their life. So it's got some pluses and minuses for rich people, but it's not really about poor people and middle-class people. What we really need to do is realize that Social Security is in terrible trouble fiscally. The retirement system has not worked. Having 100 different types of programs to which people don't contribute enough, to which people may make bad investments, this is not working. We need a new retirement system. Everybody should be contributing 10% of their pay to a joint fund that's invested by a laptop in a global index of stocks and bonds where the proportions are based on an index fund, and where they're done by computer, so it's not up for any Wall Street person's decision making, and there's no fees. And then you get your money out in proportion to what you put in retirement in a payment that continues until you die. And the contributions would be split 50-50 between spouses. And there'd also be matching contributions for the poor by the government. That's a retirement system that makes sense. That's the kind of thing that Norway and Singapore and intelligent countries are actually doing as I speak.
Now you're talking about a government-sponsored system. And of course, we are here on Newsmax television, a pretty conservative group who might say, whoa, wait a minute, we don't need bigger government, we need less government.
This is smaller government, David, because what you do is you put money in, and now a computer takes over and invested your money and everybody else's in the same way in the global marketplace. Nobody, so people's retirements are not a function of whether or not they had a good broker or not, and they don't have to pay any fees. This would all be done at zero cost. So there's actually no government here. There's a laptop. My MacBook Pro could run the entire system.
So would this essentially do away with individual 401k plans from various companies, because it would be more of a macro plan offered to employees everywhere in the United States?
Yeah, 401k plans have been, unfortunately, they've been a failure. The whole system of retirement accounts, all they've done is enriched Wall Street because every time we contribute to these accounts, we have to pay for the fees, the maintenance, administration. This can all be done by my laptop, literally. So if you want to have less government, less regulation, there's ways to do it. I'm not for big government. I think the Social Security's bureaucracy, Social Security has hundreds of thousands of rules that are absolutely incomprehensible. That's why I had to write that book, Get What's Yours, a bestseller. It's not because it's a simple system. So I'm with you and your viewers 100% that we need to have less government where government's not operating.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that on behalf of all of our viewers. We need to take a quick commercial break. Please stay with us for another segment. And you stay with us too. We'll be back here with more coming up in just a bit on the income generation.
David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model.
Call now for a free copy of David's latest book. Go to soundincomestrategies.com/income to find out more.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow The Income Generation show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes.
The Secure Act is just one in a string of proposals on Capitol Hill that are aimed at addressing some of the growing challenges that are facing Americans preparing for retirement. Challenges such as longer lifespans, skyrocketing healthcare costs, and concerns about the solvency of Social Security. Even if none of these proposals are passed by the end of the year, odds are they'll be looked at by lawmakers again in the future. Why? Because the challenges that they seek to address are only going to get worse over time. So here's a rundown on what's on the table right now in addition to the Secure Act. In July, the House Ways and Means Committee held a hearing on a new bill called the Social Security 2100 Act, which we've also discussed previously on the show. Now, as you may know, Social Security's trust funds are currently set to run out by 2035, after which only 80% of promised benefits will be able to be paid to recipients. Now, the Social Security 2100 Act looks to fix that problem by extending the solvency of the program into the next century. It also includes other changes, including increasing payroll taxes, while avoiding benefit cuts entirely. The bill would give those receiving Social Security a raise equaling 2% of the average benefit and would set the new minimum benefit at 25% above poverty line. The proposal would also increase the amount of non-Social Security income a person can earn before benefits begin to be taxed. The new limits would go to $50,000 for individuals and $100,000 for couples, compared to today's thresholds of $25,000 and $32,000 a year, respectively. Now, in order to pay for these changes, the bill calls for raising payroll taxes on wages up to and over $400,000. It also calls for more payroll contributions from workers and employers, with a gradual increase from 6.2% to 7.4%, and to be phased in from the year 2020 to 2043. The Social Security 2100 Act currently has more than 200 co-sponsors in the House, and supporters hope to move it to the floor for a vote sometime this fall. However, there is far less optimism about the Senate approving this bill as it's currently written. Now, that's a bit concerning for proponents of the bill who point out that 2035 really isn't that far around the corner, and that the longer lawmakers wait to fix the problem, the bigger the size of either the tax increase or the ultimate benefit reduction becomes. Now, like Social Security, many so-called multiple employer pension plans are also in danger of running out of money. In response to that problem, the House passed the Rehabilitation for Multi-Employer Pensions Act just last month. This bill would also allow pensions to borrow money to remain solvent so they could continue to pay retirees. It would create a pension rehabilitation administration within the Treasury Department and a trust fund from which the loans would be distributed. Currently, an estimated 10 million Americans have multi-employer pensions. So it makes this a pretty broad issue affecting constituents of both political parties. Nonetheless, there are issues that make this proposal's passage highly questionable as well. For starters, private multi-employer pensions are underfunded by about $638 billion, while state and local pensions are reportedly facing shortfalls between $4 and $6 trillion. Many are worried that if politicians decide to help private sector workers, they'll be obliged to do the same for teachers, firefighters, and other public employees whose pensions in some ways are even in more jeopardy. And from there, the ball will just keep snowballing. Some other bills in the early stages of consideration among lawmakers include the Health Savings for Seniors Act and the Equal Treatment of Public Servants Act. The first is a bipartisan bill that would allow individuals on Medicare to continue to contribute to a health savings account, which under current law is not allowed. The second seeks to enable public workers to get larger Social Security benefits, because a current rule reduces their benefits based on how much pension income that they receive. Again, these are all proposals, and they're aimed at addressing some of the growing challenges facing today's generation of retirees and near retirees. And since those challenges are only going to increase over time, it stands to reason that at least some of this legislation will eventually become law. But as we all know, the wheels of government turn slowly when they manage to turn at all. So don't wait on Uncle Sam. My best advice, as you well know, find a financial advisor today who can help you take the steps to address these challenges all on your own, regardless of what new rules may or may not eventually come to pass. And we'll talk more about that too coming up in just a bit. First, let's welcome back for one final segment, author and good friend of the income generation, Dr. Laurence Katlikoff. Dr. Katlikoff, thanks again for sticking around for one last segment here. So your comments at the end of the last segment about less government means that you've got my vote. So if you decide to run in November of 2020, you have my, well, wait a minute, I shouldn't say that yet. Because, as you know, we currently have an economics expert in the White House at this particular time, right? So let me back up and let me ask you a generic economics question, getting away from Social Security for just a moment. And that question is this inverted yield curve that we're talking about. right now. Making the news, you hear it everywhere. How bad is that? How concerned do we have to be about that? And as an economist, what do you think that means?
I think people are panicking, and that's, when you move into, if you think that things are so bad that the best thing you can do is to invest in a 30-year Treasury bond at 2%, you have to be really, really nervous about the future of the economy. But if you're sensible and realize that our country is so broke that we're going to be printing money, then you want to stay as far away as possible from any kind of investment like that. So what I see the inverted yield curve as showing us in these low rates is the kind of panic we saw back in 2008. And this is really what can kick off a recession. It's not so much any particular fact or true economic outcome, but if everybody gets collectively scared, we can have a recession, we can have a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Sure we can. So,
Yeah.
okay, but is it that, or in the 1 minute we have left, is it global pressure? Is it the fact that we've got negative interest rates all over Europe and in countries like Italy and Spain that ideally, theoretically have more risk than ours, but yet their bond yields are lower? So is this a global thing more than a panic thing? Your thoughts? Or is it a global panic?
I think it may be a global panic, and the fact that the German 30-year bond rate is now negative. This doesn't really make much sense at all. You may have people in developing countries saying, gee, I just want to keep my money safe, even if I get a zero or even a negative return. I think it'll be safer in Germany than in China. So we don't quite know where all this is coming from, but we do know that from history, from a long history and also recent history, that if enough people get scared enough, we will have a recession. And what's very interesting right now is that the searches on Google for recession have gone like this.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
just spiked up.
All because of our friends in the media, absolutely.
Also,
Dr.
we have,
Katlikoff, thanks so much for being on the show. Unfortunately, we need to leave it there for today. We're out of time. And thanks for being such a good friend of the income generation. And you stay with us also. We'll be right back here with more in just a moment. Now, as I pointed out on this show, one distinguishing feature of the baby boomer generation when it comes to retirement planning is that we're more or less on our own. The defined benefit pension plans that were far more common in previous generations have all but disappeared. And, as we've discussed today, even many existing pensions are in danger of running out of money. As I've also discussed many times, the Social Security system that our parents and grandparents counted on has problems, and it needs a government fix in order to remain solvent beyond the next 16 years. Through bills like the Secure Act and Social Security 2100, lawmakers are seeking to address these and other retirement challenges that face baby boomers, members of the income generation, today. But at the end of the day, I would argue it's best to continue having that mindset that you're on your own. In truth, that shouldn't be hard for most baby boomers, since another distinguishing factor of our generation is self-sufficiency. We like being in control, we like taking charge of our own destiny. And overall, that's a good thing. But it's important to remember that sometimes taking charge and having control means finding the right coach to guide you. It means being coachable. It means working with a professional who has the specialization and the experience to tackle today's unique challenges as they relate to your financial situation. All of that is especially true when it comes to financial planning, particularly in today's unprecedented age of economic uncertainty, and with so many complex changes to address. Sure, the government's seeking to help you address some of these challenges, but the proposed legislative changes we've talked about today barely scratch the surface. For example, regardless of what new laws and rules are put into place, the onus will still be on you to know how to satisfy your RMDs with minimal tax burden and without the risk of spending down your principal. It will still be up to you to properly coordinate Social Security options with your other sources of retirement income and to know how to maximize those benefits. It will still be up to you to protect your money from market volatility and the long-term impacts of inflation, to maximize your return amid fluctuating, currently dropping interest rates, to prepare for rising healthcare costs, and to create a plan that ensures that you have reliable income and secure principal for up to 30 years or more of retirement. The fact is, most people, and even many financial advisors, simply don't have the knowledge and experience to tackle all of these challenges on their own. That's why when it comes to retirement planning, taking charge and being in control starts with finding the right coach. And now it's time to welcome our next guest and good friend, David Stearns, president and founder of Stearns Retirement Group in Watkinsonville, Georgia. Thanks for joining us today, David.
Thanks, Dave. Glad to be here.
Now, you have your own thoughts about the Secure Act, that potential concerns that you have about it. Let's talk about that for just a couple minutes.
Well, I think the name, the Secure Act, it's a fairly audacious title, and I'm trying to think how it's going to make communities secure for retirement. You know, there's a retirement crisis, we all agree. There's the current retirement crisis, there's the future retirement crisis. How can we get younger people to start saving? That's another whole issue. But the concerns that I have for current retirees, which is where most of my clients are, is that many of these changes are good for the tax revenue, I believe, of the United States and not necessarily so good for retirement long term.
So let's talk short term versus long term.
Okay.
Short term, I would say that doesn't make any sense. It's definitely not true, simply because, gosh, if you can do IRA contributions longer, you don't have to take the withdrawals, the RMDs from the IRA until longer. Short term, it's going to hurt the government. However, I, like you, like to always think about, okay, what's the other agenda that the government has here for which they're trying to propose this, right? So that's what's
Right.
going on in your mind. And I think the long term is where the government gets the windfall, because they're encouraging people who make $15,000 of income as a couple to take a $14,000 tax deduction.
Exactly.
And virtually save zero taxes, but defer it down the road where their heirs are going to inherit it and might pay 30-40% because they're still working. So is that what you're thinking? That's really the long-term whammy that you're concerned about, that individuals might have to incur?
Well, it is. From 1936 to 1981, the tax brackets for the highest income earners in our country never dropped below 70. So we know taxes were a lot higher in the past. There's not too many people that I can think of on the planet that don't think taxes are not going to go up in the future. So I operate under the assumption that they're on sale today. So if I've got a client who's 73 years old working at Walmart, just because the government says now with the Secure Act they can put money away and take a tax deduction, well, when they pull it out when they're 87, because we are concerned about life expectancy and longevity, what if their tax bracket is a lot higher?
What if they pay more taxes than they saved initially?
Right.
Good point.
I think
Hold on, David. We need to take a quick commercial break, but stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute. And you stay with us too. We'll be back after the break here on The Income Generation. Welcome back. We're here today talking with our good friend, David Stearns, personal great friend of mine, who's president and founder of Stearns Retirement Group. David, thanks for sticking around through the commercial break. So, okay, it's interesting because if you have somebody over 70 years old who can do a tax-deductible IRA or do a Roth IRA, and they're earning a little bit more than $15,000 of income, what are you going to tell them to do? The regular IRA, take deduction, or the Roth IRA?
Well, I'm thinking the Roth IRA, the Roth IRA was not really talked about in the Secure Act, not a Roth 401k, not a Roth IRA. I didn't see a lot of mention of that. And I would encourage that client to do a Roth IRA. The issue is save money, but don't take the tax deduction now. Take it later when tax rates will be higher. So if we go ahead and go with the Roth IRA, let that money not get a tax break going in, but grow on a tax deferred basis and then be able to pull it all out when there's a chance that tax rates will be higher. Then your heirs also will appreciate that more long term as well. And
they can, of course, do the Roth IRAs right now. So maybe what the government's trying to do is entice them with a tax deduction today. I mean, we are a society, unfortunately, of what have you done for me lately? So some people might, hey, I'll save 10 cents today, not even realizing they might be paying 30 cents in the future. So I appreciate your insight in that as usual. Social Security, we've got about a minute and a half left. Social Security, what do you see being, in your practice, being some of the major problems with how your clients, before they meet you, left to their own vices, want to take their Social Security benefits?
Well, I think there's a lot of fear about the solvency or longevity of Social Security. There's no doubt it's in trouble, but if you look at the trust fund and you look at the numbers, they don't need to operate under extreme fear. I think there's a lot of barbershop, beauty shop advice that they have, just gut feel, extreme views. We use something called the Social Security maximization software. There's a lot of confusion surrounding the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015 and which strategies did and didn't go away. So we like to really just tell people, there's art and then there's math with Social Security. There's your gut and then there's the calculator. And we like to keep an eye on both and help them think through that really carefully.
David, thanks so much for being here on the show today. Unfortunately, we need to leave it there for time. Love to have you back. And you stay with us too, and you come back also for our next segment right here on the Income Generation in just a moment.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow the Income Generation Show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank both of our guests for joining us for another episode of the Income Generation. But I'd also like to thank you, our new and returning viewers. With so much finger pointing, division, and general chaos in Washington these days, positive stories about the government are bound to get lost in the shuffle. But the fact is that lawmakers are actually working across party lines to address some of the retirement challenges now facing Americans. And this is, I would argue, a very positive story. Yes, some of these proposals still face high hurdles in the Senate, but at least it's encouraging to know our elected officials are aware of these issues and trying to fix them. The Secure Act represents the biggest legislative overhaul of retirement rules in over a decade, and there's optimism that it could win approval as soon as this fall. If so, it would give retirees an extra year and a half to grow their retirement accounts tax deferred, and would allow people with earned income to continue making contributions to their traditional IRAs after age 70 and a half. It would also enable more small businesses to offer retirement plans cost effectively, addressing the needs of more than 28 million Americans who currently do not have access to such a workplace retirement plan. Also on the table now is the Social Security 2100 Act, which seeks to address the problems with the Social Security program and the projected shortfall for 2035 and later, and to ensure that hardworking Americans continue receiving their full benefits long into the future. Now, other bills up for discussion right now aim to fix brewing problems with pensions and Medicare. But again, at the end of the day, regardless of whatever new rules and regulations eventually come down the pike, the responsibility of tackling today's challenges and achieving your retirement goals ultimately falls on you. It's up to you to maximize your Social Security benefits and coordinate them with the rest of your retirement income. It's up to you to understand all of your options for satisfying your RMDs and to choose the right options. In other words, it's up to you to find a financial advisor with the understanding and experience to guide you through this process. Thanks again for watching. If you're close to retirement and you really want to know how to protect and maximize your money, it's absolutely essential that you stay informed and up to date. And as you know, right here is where you can do it on the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you next week.